Welcome to the Music Mission. My name is Panagiotis Karamanos. I am a music teacher in Sydney, Australia, as well as the conductor and director of the Modest Orchestra, an orchestra consisting of passionate professional musicians that prioritise the education and enjoyment of music through the performance of staple works and new compositions. All recordings you hear, including this background music, come from our public performances, which you can find on YouTube if you search Modest Orchestra. This podcast is designed for all lovers of music, no matter your musical preference, experience, or expertise. Now on to today's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today we're going to be talking with Dexter Cave, who I've known since 2009, and we're going to be talking about music productions. So say hi, Dexter.
Hey guys, hope you're all well out there during this trying time.
Yeah. Trying hard times indeed.
Certainly is.
So, Dexter and I, we've known each other since basically year 7 at Con High.
Yeah, a long time.
And,
you were like probably up there with the first friend I had at school.
Right. Yeah. And because we also could live quite close to each other, didn't we?
Yeah. So yeah, the only people from the same area.
Yeah, and we both played brass instruments, so we, a lot of the time we did chamber music together. Remember that one year in year?
Oh, in year 8 when we had Bruce, and it was just the two of us because they didn't know what to do with the two brass players. They were like, "We've got a bunch of kids who play piano and violin. That's easy. We've got one kid who plays French horn, one kid that plays trumpet, and we've got to put them in a chamber music group, and we don't know where to put them, so we'll just put them together."
You know what's funny? That's exactly happening right now with my year 9s.
Oh, of course, because it's hard, man. Like unless you have you need a tuba player and a couple of trombone players, and then you can do your brass quartets and quintets. But otherwise, you're stuffed. You can't do it. Two brass instruments.
Yeah, we've just got a trombone girl and a trumpet girl just together as a chamber because we have chamber as well. But I don't take that, so I just wonder and I go, "Oh dear, this is not chamber music."
Yeah, it's not. It's duet time.
It's duet time, exactly. So Dexter plays French horn, and you've played with a Modest Orchestra a few times.
Yeah, a few times. I quite enjoy playing with Modest Orchestra because I don't get to play as much as I would like to anymore. Not for lack of trying, just because there's not a lot of French horn gigs going.
No, there isn't
in Sydney at the moment. Not unless you're really, really good.
Yeah, unless you're Chris Howes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you play with Modest, and a couple of concerts you've actually helped film and do the audio. Yeah,
so my after school, after doing the whole con thing and doing the brass thing, I decided with actually another one of a guy we studied with, Jeff, we both decided to go and instead of pursuing the performance or education or composition route education, we went and decided to do tech and do a degree in music and sound design. So sort of a bit of same as the music performance is a bit all encompassing in terms of what you do. You look at everything from like how to mix and master like for an album and how to record and how to do the mixing for a live show and how to do sound design for film and television and sort of like really out there music tech stuff and interactive and sort of getting towards the end, we're getting into like virtual reality and gaming and augmented reality and all that sort of stuff. So like they try to cover every base with that, so all the people that we study with have like a lot of options post uni, which doesn't always end up happening because even like covering all of those things, there's still not a lot of jobs, not a lot of full-time jobs for that sort of like part of those creative industries.
That's really cool. I've started to I've had conversations with you. I've started to get into sound engineering slightly. I've taught myself Ableton, which is pretty cool actually.
That's the, like, I mean, for us, that was like the first, I remember in high school actually, someone showed me Ableton and I was like, oh, this is like every instrument and more than you can imagine inside of your computer. Like, and because you sort of, when you're learning like that in that sort of formal structure, you're learning like we did. The only sort of music production stuff we did was like the MIDI and Sibelius,
Mm.
or like maybe GarageBand, or maybe Logic, but even then, like not really. And so
No.
it's like I remember seeing that and being like, this is so weird and crazy that this exists, and this is how like modern. Yeah, and I mean, maybe not in like that world, but like most music now today that you listen to that's on the radio is made in, if not made in Ableton, is made in a software like Ableton. It's like,
Yeah, like it's made in a DAW. For those
yeah,
people, it's a digital audio workstation, like Logic or GarageBand. Really, it's like something that's a workstation lets you do audio.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's a really cool, and I'm just starting to get into it. And I'm realizing how hard it is and how crazy it is. I got like a little Novation Launch Key Mini Mark III,
yeah, a little
and I'm
MIDI
just like,
controller.
yeah, and I discovered what the contact player is. So I'm like downloading samples, going, oh my gosh, I could download an
Yeah,
entire orchestra.
yeah, it's
Who
awesome.
needs Modest?
I know
Who needs Modest?
who needs, and then that's when you sort of, when you start to discover that stuff, you go like, why do they do anything? Like, why do people have orchestras at all ever? Why would you see anything live when it all exists inside my computer?
Yeah, but then I started to get a little bit frustrated, but I couldn't do certain things. But probably
Yeah,
if I
of
had like
course.
$1,000 sample
Oh,
library.
I mean, there's always going to be certain things like, but it depends on what sort of music I guess you're trying to like recreate or create.
Yeah. Do you know
Like
a guy called Apache?
Apache? No, I don't. Who's
He
it?
he's the guy that does. Okay, do you follow TikTok a little bit?
Yeah,
Do you know that really epic choir song? I'll try and play it actually on my phone. Um, we'll get copyright stricken. No, we'll be fine.
yeah.
Apache, he's really cool. He does great music, and His Majesty. I'll just play a little bit of it. And like he
I know
has an
this.
album,
Yeah.
yeah, and he has one from Lacrimosa where he just takes the opening to Mozart. And like he actually got a real orchestra and like recorded them live. He didn't. Everyone's like, "Oh, what sample library did you use?" He actually recorded it live, which is
Of
pretty cool.
course, that's awesome. And then sped it up heaps.
Yeah, and
And
you
then
get
it's
that
like,
cool effect.
yeah, and then it's like, cool, we're gonna pay to record this orchestra, and then I'm gonna absolutely destroy the audio quality by making it 4 times as fast. Which is
That's
cool.
how you do it.
But that's cool, man. That's how you make music nowadays. Is you take something really nice that you work really hard on, and then you absolutely destroy it to make something
Yep.
else.
Oh man. Oh dude. So yeah, this guy like Apache, I watched a few of his documentaries online, like how he's making it, how he's in the studio and he's like panicking, going, "Oh dear, like will the orchestra like my music?" And turns out they did. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm starting to realize how Ableton Logic are just like where it's at.
Oh, dude, it's I think that's like, and I mean, you would probably see this considering like you're in a classroom teaching kids music like every day. It's one of those things where I think, and I don't know, like I'm in two minds about it, because it's like I've learned all of these like Ableton and Logic and all that sort of stuff after school, like, and after all that initial music learning, and all that music learning is really important, like knowing how to structure a song or how to structure a piece of music and structure your harmony and understanding like complex rhythm and like all that sort of stuff is really useful in like how you're going to create something, because you need to, I mean, you don't need to know how to do those things. A lot of people don't, and they still make great music, but it's like you need to have some sort of innate understanding of those things before you can just like open up. You're not just going to like go, "Oh, I'm going to open Ableton today and I'm going to make like a new hit song." And like, it's going to totally blow up. That won't happen, just because that's not how music works. And so it's like, you're right, like they are where it's at for everyone, but I don't know, will they replace like the functional keyboard classes at university one day, or will they replace, kids learning oral and harmony in
Yeah.
like year 9 and 10? Like, instead of learning how to do like what are the notes on a treble clef and a bass clef, we're going to learn how to create sends and returns in Logic, and how to do busing.
Yeah, exactly. And how to use a step sequencer. And
Yeah.
that's something that James Humberstone, James,
Yeah.
he's really passionate about pushing forward using a DAW. And he was like to me, dude, just do a whole term with year 9 on just creating a beat. And then another term, like literally teaching. He's like, you can design a whole program around it. So you're right. You can actually do it.
Because it's so engaging as well for them, particularly like because it's so user friendly in terms of these kids that already know how to use computers quite well.
Yeah.
They're like, they can engage with you, stick them in front of an interface, and they're just like, oh, I can sort of work my way around. It's like, if they've ever edited like a photo or a piece of video, it's the same sort of type of software, just for music making.
Yeah. But on the flip side, like you said, without that base knowledge, it's kind of hard just to enter it and just like learn.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's. I mean, it might be good for some kids who like don't have that base knowledge, and to get into it. If they're not into it, it's like, okay, cool. Like, Mr. K brought up Ableton. We brought up like the like a drum kit, and we learn how to make a beat today, and then they get all excited, and then they go home and like can make a beat. But it's like, you can make a beat because you understand, like, because you've heard that, and like your brain has innately recognized those patterns through like just sort of culture, like an understanding of, if you listen to music, you know how to make that sort of thing. But then it's like, to understand exactly what you're doing is then you'd have to like retroactively learn that. And I think a lot of people do it. Like, when you find out about like pretty big people who have worked in like record production, particularly in like the world of music that's maybe less theoretical, like people who are into like hip hop or like more dance music or stuff like that, which is what these softwares like are used for a lot. They're not coming to Logic or coming to FL Studio or Ableton and going, all right, cool, today we're going to make a song in a minor pentatonic, which is usually what like that sort of music's in, right? It's usually like some like minor pentatonic with some bells and like that sort of sound. But they're not thinking that. They're coming into it and they might have heard like a cool sample, and then they'll play something, and then later on they'll sort of be like, oh, cool, I really like that beat. Why do I like it? What's that chord he's using? What's that key he's using? What's that progression? And then they'll learn about that, and then that's how they get like really into the theory of it. But because they already know how to make the beat. So it's like, I know people like that because I sort of, going to university, like we had a songwriting class, and it was, for a lot of kids, it was like, okay, cool, today we're doing like songwriting, we're going to do chord structures, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And Jeff and I are sitting in this class, and the teacher's sitting at the piano, and she's playing chords, and she's like, okay guys, what's this chord? And then like, what's the next chord? And what's their relationship? And Jeff and I, they're like banging our heads on the ground, because it's like, it was just like stuff we were doing in like year 8 and year 9 harmony classes. But it's
probably
like
year 7.
Yeah, well, exactly. And for these guys, they have no idea. They can't read music, but these guys like are really good at producing music. And so for them, it's so much more interesting, because they can learn how to make stuff that's maybe a little bit more nuanced, or they can actually understand what they're doing while they're doing it, instead of just doing it. It's sort of like, people who can, like, they have really good pattern recognition, but they don't understand what are the parts that make up the pattern.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think there's an advantage? Like, okay, what do you think is better, really? Because like you're classically trained, and then you became essentially a music producer.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between what you and Jeff can do that others can't do, or is there something that others can't do that, because you and Jeff have this like expert knowledge of like harmony and functional music, like you two are like literally high end, like peaking, does that put you at a disadvantage maybe?
I mean, yeah, I think sometimes it does put us at a disadvantage in terms of like that thing where if you're trying to be like really creative with what you're trying to make something really new and interesting, and you know so much, there's too many things to pull from. Or like for example, like stuff. Thinking about the stuff that we learned in like that you learn in year 11 and 12 music. Um, it's like you're learning like really full on like tone rows and like serialism and all this
Oh
sort of
yeah.
stuff that's like full on modernist composition that's really interesting and important to know about. But it's like you learn so much about that, but then you don't learn about like modern song structure or like
No.
any of those sorts of things, which you can then pick up. Like Jeff and I picked up those things quite easily because like, you know, through either through jazz or through just like you just have a good ear for it. But like
Mm.
you don't have, because your understanding of it is functional before it's like emotional, you have a more of a
Ah.
functional relationship to it. Like I think
Whoa.
Jeff and I would sit down, like we'd be given an assessment and it'd be like, okay guys, you've got, you know, 3 weeks, produce a song.
Mm.
And I mean, I know Jeff and I have talked about this before, and we sort of agree to, and disagree. It has levels and waves to it, right? But it's like that
Mm.
thing of like sometimes you might overthink the chord that you're going to use in that progression. So, like, say you've got like you're playing like a 2 4 5 1 or something like that.
Mm.
You know, like a minor 2 with like a flat 7, whatever, doesn't matter. But you're going to start adding extensions on there
Mm.
because you're like, I've got to make this more interesting. You're going to be thinking
Yeah.
about the voice leading, and you know about all that sort of stuff because you have the context of it. But at the same time, you'll be sitting there going like, oh, what note, like what extension should I use on that chord, or like does that
Mm.
work? And then like, and then you get too into like the ins and outs of it and not enough about like what's the point of making the music. Like, am I making a song that's meant to make people feel like this or that, or do I just want something that's going to be fun? Like, it's, I think, and that's like the big thing about sort of all sorts of composition, like whether it's, you know, whether you are writing like for an orchestra or you are producing a track purely based on samples and MIDI
Mm.
in Logic. Like, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I making this for? Like,
Right.
what am I doing? Like, what am I using it for? And like sometimes it is, you are a commissioned composer and you're doing it for a film or for whatever, for someone, for a purpose. Sometimes it's like if you are just like that person who's just like, I'm a composer and I'm an artist or whatever, and you sit down and you go, okay, cool, I've got this progression, yeah, but I don't know if it's working. And then
Mm.
sometimes like it's useful to have that information at extra training because you can come up with all those solutions. But also sometimes it's useful to not have it because the amount of solutions you can come up with is more limited, which means that your creative choices like aren't as numerous, which means you're not as like, you're not faced with as many choices. You don't have to make as many choices at every step. So it's like, what are the voicings? Okay, cool. What's the rhythm going to be? Like, what's that? And like, you just get so bogged down in all the different like choices that you make that are of course informed by like modern songwriting. So of course you don't want to be too weird and then do. And that was the thing as well with that I'd find is like Jeff would play some like sick thing on the keys and I'd listen to it and I'm like, all right, that was cool, but like
Mm.
way too jazzy. Like
Ah.
way too like the vocabulary of it in terms of like the harmonic content is not friendly to like a modern like pop listener's ear, maybe, right?
Yep.
Like the
Exactly.
like the kind of person who's like listening to the radio is going to listen to that and be like, oh, that's jazz, and not think, oh, that's a pop song, you know. And so like it's then
Yeah.
like picking up the vocabulary, like the harmonic vocabulary of those like sort of songs or pieces of music and understanding like how to exist within that world, like, and use your own voice and whatever, but like exist within that world without sticking out too much and seeming like you're trying to be an imposter or like recreate something that you don't fully understand or recreate something with something that you have too much of an understanding of. And so I like it's a good question. Is it too much? Is it better to have learned before? And sometimes I'm like, I'm glad I know all this stuff, and other times I'm like, man, I wish
It
I
just
don't.
limits you, holds you back.
Well, yeah, I don't wish I didn't know it. Like,
Right.
I'm glad I do know it. I just sometimes wish I knew different things instead.
Right.
Like I'd learned something else. Like I'd learned how to play guitar, but like learned how to play guitar in like a rock band or in like
Right.
like blues guitar, or learn how to
Can you
play,
play guitar?
like, yeah, but very poorly. And
Can you play
also,
bar chords?
yes,
Okay, so you're fine.
like, yeah, it's fine. Well, and then exactly, and that's that thing. And then you're just playing bar chords, and then you're like, cool, I can play every chord on the guitar because you just go up chromatically.
Yeah. And then you realize, oh wait, oh no, I've got to do other shapes. Oh no,
Yeah,
I
I have to
can't
do other
just do
shapes
E
because
minor.
because those are bad voicings, because it's
Yeah.
just the same voicing, and then you're just and that's so that's an interesting example, right? Like there are some, so that's called chord planing, and
Chord planing.
So
Oh my gosh, is that an actual term?
yeah, so chord planing is like, so in dance music, what, like, so imagine, I'm trying to think of, like, you imagine some like 90s like house track that's got like
Okay.
a piano chord sample in it, and it's like dun 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 dun, and then it would
Yeah.
change and there'd be a progression, but the chord voicing is always the same because they're not like, before MIDI piano sounds were really good, like sampled MIDI piano
Ah.
sounds really good. It would just be a sample and they would just transpose the sample. But the
Oh
thing
no.
is because the sample is, for example, maybe like a -7 chord, every chord is the same voiced -7 chord, just moved up and down 4 semitones, 7 semitones, like, so that it just fits into this progression. And so like that's
Yeah.
chord playing. It's sort of the same as just playing all bar chords. It's like it's the same chord just moved up or down a few semitones, and it's a certain sound. Like, don't get me wrong, it it sounds good in some contexts, but in others it's just like, well, that's really boring.
That's really, yeah, it's just really
It's the
bad.
same. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's it's such a weird thing. So does that mean, so your style as an artist, you and Jeff, do you say that you guys, when you produce stuff, do you explore like more complex harmonies and stuff, or like, and you don't focus on the beat and things like that, or like,
Well, I mean, sometimes, sometimes it's hard. It's so hard to, like, because you have those, you know about these things that exist that are really like complex, and then you feel like you're not, like, sometimes I've written things, like I've written a couple of things recently actually, and they're just like like 4 chords. And okay, so I think that's like, that's a sort of an interesting launch point for something that I like. The reason I got into, when I first heard Ableton being used and I
mm,
sort of learned about that, I was like, the thing that was so interesting about it is that it wasn't like the harmonic possibility or the rhythmic possibility, which are also like awesome and really interesting, but all of those things are already being explored in live, like, quote unquote classical music, or like live concert music.
art music.
Art music, yeah, art music. Um, and so like the thing that was really interesting was like the sound, like the actual sounds, like the, what we would call
Tone color.
tone color or texture. Yeah, like you can
Yeah.
create these sounds that don't exist in the real world.
No, they don't. They're
And
so cool.
yeah, and so like that's sort of where I'll like kick off in that direction. If I would be like, okay, cool, I wrote these 4 chords and they're really boring, or like they're not boring, but they're just like standard to the sort of like what
They're
sort of
vanilla
like what,
chords.
yeah, they're vanilla. They're what you'd expect in like a hip hop track or in a dance track or in a rock song or whatever.
Mm.
And then, but then it's like, and it's the same. Like when you listen to certain artists that you know that are really interesting,
Yeah.
like the reason that most people find them interesting is because they have like a signature texture, signature tone colors, and like maybe they
Mm.
have signature harmonies as well. But like, if you do that, you know, those analysis, or you know, that example of the guys that like get up and they're like, we're going to play 4 chord songs, and they just like play like 100 different songs using the
Yeah, yeah,
same
yeah.
4 chords, like using like a 6 5 4 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's cool that we can have so many different songs that are all in different styles and different genres and about different content and happy and sad, and some are this and that and the other. And they all use the same harmony, like exactly the
But
same harmony, but they're also different because
yeah.
they all have different melodies. First of all, that's the thing. They do have different melodies, but
They
also
do, yes.
they have different texture and they have different tone color. And that's like the main thing is like you can have like a really full on, like happy, like big, bright, like synth heavy dance track. And then you could also have like a really pared back, like singer songwriter, guitar, and like cajon and voice, like really simple thing. And they're exactly the same harmony, but they're completely different songs. Like
Yeah.
they're not even all related.
Well, I'm at the moment. I made a song 2 years ago called "Heart of Gold" for an assignment. We had a topic called PMS, which was
Yep.
Pop Music Studies. Great
Yep.
acronym.
Cool.
And
Man, that PMS.
yeah, it was always great. It's like, oh, I've got PMS today. Was always the statement. Everyone said that. So in pop music studies, they like make a pop song, and so I did. It had with acoustic guitar, like me singing backing vocals. Aries sang the vocals, piano, and I've kind of just picked that up recently, and I've just I've discovered Contact with a K, Contact Player,
Contact
and
by Native Instruments, not sponsored.
yeah, not sponsored. Please sponsor us. And then I chucked it into Ableton. I was like, okay, cool. Let me create some loops. So I created the four chord loop, and I got the melody. And then I just started loading in these plugins, and I started playing with like all these digitizers, all these samplers. And it's a completely different song. Like if I show you,
Yeah,
which I will, the original acoustic version versus this this amazing like electric sound, but
you can build up a whole like orchestral array of sounds, and not using like traditional orchestra sounds. You can use like whatever sounds you want, and it's like going to be as big as that sort of a texture, which is so crazy, right?
Yeah. And so that's what this is. It's kind of like it's not. It's got. I've downloaded the BBC Symphony Orchestra sample pack, which is
nice.
totally free if you wait 2 weeks. But I couldn't wait 2 weeks, so I just paid $50. I thought, well, the money goes to the musicians, and COVID, everyone needs money, so I decided to do that. So I bought it. So it's got a bit of like a bit of a string orchestra in there. It's got trumpets and everything. It's really cool. So it's like this it's got like the textural thickness of an orchestra, but it's not an orchestra.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool.
It's crazy. Play it.
Now?
Oh, I mean, you don't have to play it now.
Oh, okay.
Show it to me later.
Yeah, I'll definitely show you. And you'll see the old one where it's like me dodgily playing guitar. And it's like missing the strings.
Yeah, or not fretting correctly, and then like getting buzzing and like
yeah, buzzing. And I couldn't quite play 2 strings at the same time in thirds, so I actually multi-tracked 2 individual strings separately, one at a time. And there's also flamming.
That's fine. That's fine. That's the art of the recording, is that you don't have to play it all at the same time.
Exactly.
Well, and that's it. That's the other thing, right? Is that it's like you spend all this time. It's like, when we did you did the Modest project with like for the orchestra, like the virtual
orchestra, yeah.
Right. And it's like, when I recorded the horn parts, like I recorded the first time I did it, for the first part I did it all in one take, which is like most of the musicians that would have submitted would have done one take, listening through, and then send it to you. But then the next time I couldn't get the part right. And so I just did it and recorded it over and over and over again into Ableton until I got it right. And then I stitched it all together so that it was all in the right order and all in the right timing.
That's called comping, isn't it?
Yeah. And so like, that's one of those things that I was like, well, I haven't practiced in a while. I know I can physically play this, but I'm not going to nail it all in one take. So I can just comp this part a bunch of times. And then
is that what you did?
And then get the perfect take, right? And it's like done. And then but the thing is well, that's funny about that is like I did the comping, but I missed, there was like one bar that I couldn't nail. And so I was like, no, I'll leave it for now and I'll come back and do it tomorrow. And then I came
Mm.
back and did it tomorrow, and then my sound the next day was completely different. Like because I because I hadn't played in ages, and then I played one day, it was like quite bright on the first day, and then the next day I was like, because I was completely chopped from the day before, I was like, oh no, it sounds really bad because like there's
Yeah,
just
it's
one
like
bar that's just completely sounds like a different person on a different day in a different room. Like even though it's not, it's
on
just
a
me.
different mic.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's just like what happened, but that's one of those things that if I didn't tell you that, you probably wouldn't know,
Mm.
because that's how good sort of we can be at stitching together. Like when you do vocal comps, and that's like when you listen to a pop song or listen to any piece of music, none of what you're listening to is like the vocalist or any of the instrumentalists on that song playing front to back perfectly. None.
No, I've learnt that. I've really learnt that. I used to think it was.
Yeah, you just think, oh, the band just gets into the studio, the guitarist, the drummer goes into a different room because he's really loud, but they're all synced up, and then everyone just plays their part all at the same time, like they would do it live, and then that's it. And it's like, no. Like usually the drummer comes in, they'll lay it down, and then what'll happen is they'll go, okay, cool. Maybe the verse drums and the chorus drums are different. We'll get like 4 bars of the verse drums that are good, and then we'll just loop it.
Yeah.
And then we've got four bars of the chorus drums that are good, and then we'll loop it, and then there might be some fills in the transitions, and we'll comp those in, and so you can have that like playing, and then the drummer will just come in on the fill for like the comp, so they know that, and then you'll be like, okay, cool, drums done, sweet. We'll get the bass player in. Maybe we'll get the drummer and bass player to do it at the same time, but like probably not. Bass player in, bass player. If they're a really good bass player, I know a couple of bass players that could do it in 1 or 2 takes. If they're not, they'll do they'll do a rough. So they'll do like one play all the way through, and then they'll go in and fix all the mistakes. And so then you're like cutting in and out and in and out and in and out of like every time they miss a note, every time a note doesn't sound right, every time it's out of time, like just to fill all those holes. And it's like, oh God. And that's for every part. And you might have 50 parts, because it might be like a really complex pop song with all these synth layers and stuff. And luckily with that stuff, you can just program it. Like you can get the MIDI to play it for you. So it's
you quantize it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's like going to be theoretically perfect. But then you still have to do the vocalist. It's like all these things. It's like it's the exact opposite of what performing orchestral musicians do, which is try to get it perfect in one go on the day, no pressure. You've only been practicing your entire life for this moment.
Yeah, it's so it kind of makes you, because like, isn't this how the Queen record, like you've seen the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Yeah, and like that scene where they're filming Bohemian Rhapsody, like that was basically just, could they comp back then? Not really.
So back when they were doing tape, they did do comps, but so you're doing reel to reel. The thing with the comping is that you'd still, as a musician, have to have really good timing.
Right.
Because if you were like, oh no, I was half a second late on that comp, like you've just recorded to tape. We can erase that with silence. So what you could do is if say for example, like Freddie had sung the beginning, like, I mean, it wouldn't have been, it would have been maybe 2 takes.
Yeah.
And they would have spliced some of the bits together, but like, or you can also pause the tape, rewind, and then play back, and then hit record like halfway through.
Cool.
So you could have it playing like, and then he just comes in and sings one note here or there. But also like the vocal effects that happen in Bohemian Rhapsody are like quite, like when there's the choir of him.
Yes.
So that's actually all him singing.
Just the same tape recorded over it.
Yeah. And so
there's a limit to how much they could do that, right?
Well, yeah, because the tape would get noisier. It could only have so much. It's sort of like how audio works, digital audio works now, where like, you have like audio will clip if you have too much gain coming in. So it's the same with tape, but tape had a lot more headroom. And also if you started to fill it with too much loudness, you wouldn't get like distortion that we know now, where it's like all garbled and just like digital noise. It was more, you would just get like a grinding sort of graininess and a noisiness that was more like what people call warmth today when people talk about analog music, analog instruments and analog like vinyl or anything like that. That's like when they go, oh, that has that crackle and the warmth and stuff. That you get the same thing on tape when you had overloaded it with sound,
Oh,
which is why like a lot of people prefer sort of like a lot of artists today still record to tape.
really? I thought it was like
Yeah.
completely phased out.
Yeah, so like in Nashville, there are like I think a handful of studios where you could go in and you could record straight to tape. Like Mark Ronson, when he did what's that song he has with Miley Cyrus called?
Not The Climb, is it?
No,
Party in USA.
it's no Buddy USA. Nothing breaks like a heart. That's right.
Ah, okay.
Do you know that one? So that is like Mark Ronson in his studio. He recorded all that to tape, and then the best thing is he records it all to tape, then immediately converts it to digital so he can edit it in Pro Tools.
Ah.
Like that's the first thing he does. He's like, all right, cool, we'll cut that to tape and then we'll import it so then we can cut it together. And it's because he likes the quality of the sound on the tape, but it's like it's just
Right.
a pain in the ass to edit.
Like that'd be so bad. Oh my god.
Right? Like, yeah. I mean,
Isn't there like some sort of like plug-in that like tape emulator?
well, yeah, of course, there's heaps of those, and they're really like to you or I, to 99.9% of people, you cannot tell the difference,
Right.
except for maybe the guy that made it and some guy who's like really into tape would be able to tell.
Yeah. And
But
that's him.
Yeah, well, and I mean, probably he can't even tell, but it's just like it's a process, like it's part of the creative. I don't know, whatever.
It's authentic.
It's what he wants. And it's because he can afford to do it because it's really expensive to do it because you have to have tape and have the machinery to do it. But if you want to do it that way, you go ahead. Why not?
Yeah, I can imagine him like having a good setup for it. He's like, all right, cool. Now that that's transcoding to the computer, I'm going to go do this, which is whatever he's going to go do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting, and that's sort of when they did like Pro Tools was the first. Well, there's Cool Edit Pro, which is what is now. But Cool Edit Pro became Audition and Audacity.
Oh, okay.
So
Audacity. I hate it. I don't know why, but we can talk about that soon. But continue.
And there was also Pro Tools were like the first like big doors that were like sort of like out there and available to the public, like that weren't just used by movie studios or high level music studios. And so like places were like so like people were so blown out by the ability you could record, like, you know, for example, what we're doing right now, and then go back in, play it back immediately and cut it up into little chunks and then rearrange it. And so you could like there was all these like weird parts of the internet when this first started happening in the 90s where people would get like speeches of like things that people had said and then just reorder it so they have said something completely different. And that's how you like it was just like all these people doing these crazy things and turning spoken word into song because you could like add pitch to like you could synthesize pitch to a voice and do all that sort of stuff. And it was so crazy.
It's like what they do with those Barack Obama speeches, how they make songs out of them.
Yes, exactly. Like those, or anytime you see anything, it's like songified. Like songify thing was like the first thing that people were doing with spoken words that were recorded, like when digital audio workstations first became accessible to like the average person. When Pro Tools was like, you can download Pro Tools off our website. You know, people were like, cool, I'm going to cut up Winston Churchill talking, you know, about the end of World War II and make it into a song because why not?
Yeah. And then they did.
Yeah, and then they did. And also the other thing that they started to do was podcasting. Podcasting was actually one of the first things that people were doing because they could record to their computer and then they could upload it to the internet.
Oh, really? People weren't really. I guess they weren't really. No, they wouldn't be.
No, podcasting is very new. It's completely a digital media thing.
It is.
which is crazy. Like it's like radio, but it's, radio is ephemeral. Radio doesn't exist forever. Whereas
No,
podcasting, you can always go back and listen to.
but it only exists in digital form. And yeah, there's no such thing ever of physical.
Analog.
Why
Well,
would
you
you
could.
want
I
that?
mean, you could, man. You could record it to a cassette tape and then,
Yeah.
or to a vinyl and then distribute it. But why would someone? That means that you're assuming then that they're going to listen to it multiple times, right? Like
Which
I don't
is,
know about you, but I've only most podcasts I listen to once, maybe twice.
yeah, exactly. I don't think I've really ever listened to a podcast twice. Maybe like a short 5 minute one, like a good speech, like a motivation thing. It's like, yeah, I'm pumped. I'm ready for this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Or something that you're like, oh, I remember they said something really interesting in this podcast that I want to remember, and then you forget it, and then you have to go back to listen to it again. But like,
yeah. There was one by like Gary Vaynerchuk, who you might know, and he was like
yeah,
talking about like minimalism and how like and hustling and how to run a business. I was like, he's got some good points in that one. I'm gonna listen to it again and take better
yeah,
notes in my
yeah,
head.
exactly, and actually pay attention.
Yeah, and actually pay attention. Exactly.
It's funny. It's funny
Yeah.
what people do with tools when you give them to them. It's like they don't know what to do, because that was the thing as well. As like Pro Tools at that stage was 100. You could have 128 tracks maximum,
Mm.
and there was no MIDI, so it was purely audio. And so it was like, what do we do with this? What
Yeah.
are we meant to do as an average person? Like, what am I meant to do with this thing where I can just edit audio together? It's like,
And they just went crazy.
went
Speaking of
crazy.
MIDI, MIDI 2.0 is coming out this year. Have you heard?
Yes, I have heard. Very excited.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
so
So what is it? All I know is that you have more sensitivity. Like
I
137 was the old one, and this one has more. That's all I know. Please
yeah.
explain.
So MIDI for those who don't know is musical instrument digital interface. It is like a really really old standard of musical information like, so it's purely just timed information transferring, like that's all that's happening.
How long has this been
um
around for?
it's been, let me check, I think I want to say the 80s.
80s.
uh,
Whoa.
yeah,
No, surely.
MIDI as a protocol was introduced at the 1981.
Whoa.
Yeah,
And it has.
so
We're on to version 2 only. What?
yeah,
Why is it take?
okay, so MIDI came about because there were there were a huge there were all these conferences happening with all these dudes who were all the big synthesizer manufacturers, and the problem is that you couldn't get two synthesizers to communicate to each other in like a way that made sense, because the way that the engineers would design these instruments, like they just, like, there's a thing called control voltage, which is like just electrical current, which is like used a lot now in synthesizers, but that at the time people weren't making things that were operating at control voltage, which is like quite a high voltage. And so there was no communication protocol between synthesizers. And this is also like synthesizers are starting to become digital. They're getting sequences in them. So maybe I have my like nice synthesizer and I have a sequencer in it, but I also want to sequence my drum machine at the same time. So theoretically, I should be able to take one of the sequence options out the back and turn on a kick drum, right? But I can't do that because these synthesizers won't talk to each other.
Which
And
is
so,
what happened with the first Terminator movie. Actually, I watched the
yes,
music. He
yes,
was struggling. He had to do it all by hand, didn't he?
yeah, exactly. And so there was Dave Smith, who is this guy that says this company called Sequential Circuits, and they make synthesizers, and they make very good synthesizers actually. And he wrote a paper and he presented it to the Audio Engineering Society at a conference in New York. And I think he originally wanted to call it the Universal Synthesizer Interface, but it turned
Universal use,
USI, so Universal Synthesizer Interface, and
right?
that name wasn't like, they never took that up because MIDI A was like purely digital, so it was taking analog control voltages and turning them into a digitized, or able to turn them into a digitized signal, which means that you could have a computer that could interface with a synthesizer in theory, even though at this time in 1981, that's not what they were thinking.
No.
But and so like but the problem was is that when they proposed this, the problem was is that like, okay, cool, this is a really great idea. All these companies were like, okay, cool, we want to put that in our synthesizer because that's like a marketability thing, and then we can talk with our other, like, we can sell expansion packs for our old synthesizers where you plug a thing into the back and then it makes it MIDI compatible and all this sort of thing.
Right.
And so they started this company called the MIDI MMA, which is the MIDI Manufacturers Association, and they sort of like, when all this was happening, they were like, oh my God, they had to come up with all of the standards so quickly because the demand was so high for all these instruments to have it. So they were like, okay, cool. We only have 128 possible what do they call them? 128 possible velocities, yeah. Like they say velocity, but like the velocities are used for lots of different things, for like clock and for slurring and all that sort of thing. And so you have 0 to 127, 0 being nothing, 127 being like the highest thing. So imagining you've only got 127 ways, like levels of loudness that you can play a note, or levels of pitch, or levels of all those different parameters that you could have for a musical instance, because it's not necessarily a note, it can also be like a rest or whatever. And so they had to come up with all these standards, and they were like, okay, cool. And then they cemented it really quickly. Like, I think it took them like 2 years, and they just turned it around from when Dave Smith was like, we need this thing. And then they were like, yeah, we did it. And so for ages they were like, well, nothing's really wrong with, like, there were lots of things wrong with MIDI, but like MIDI is, and they just change, over time they change, like it's like a 5-pin connector, and then you could do it through USB, and then like all those sorts of things changed.
Oh, the 5-pin connectors, I've seen them, yeah.
Yeah, that's the original MIDI 1.0 jack, right?
Yeah.
And then like they just changed like what you could have MIDI transferred over, like what's the format. But like essentially that was it. And it was like, well, MIDI's like, up until this point, MIDI 1.0 is in, like, I've got every piece of musical equipment I have that's got like a power socket on it, has like a MIDI capability, right? Yeah. And so they're like, well, nothing's wrong with it. It's been 40 years. Like, it's been good to us. And then I think it was that thing where it's like, over, like, even 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, people were like, well, aren't you going to fix it? Like, I want more options for velocity. I want, like,
does it change how, like, talking with each other, like things like that?
The problem is that like there will have to be like a first instrument that's a MIDI 2.0 instrument that maybe will have all these problems. It won't be able to talk to MIDI 1.0. It won't be like, because it has a high resolution. How do you scale that resolution? Because it's like, if it's got a high resolution for velocity and you've got, say, it's like going from 8-bit to 16-bit to 32-bit, right? And it's like, well, when you get like a really good quality 32-bit video or sound recording, and then you compress it right down to an 8-bit, and it chooses, and you can see it like particularly in an image, like you get certain squares, and it's like, this square is red. And it's like, well, maybe before that particular like big pixel used to have like 10 different colors in it, or 30 different colors in it. And now it's just been averaged out to red. And so it's like, so how do you average out, like, is a note on, is a note off, is a note loud, is a note soft? Like,
there's a lot of issues there. I can see it coming up now.
Yeah. And so like you get 16 channel audio becoming 256 channel audio, and like it took them a while, and they finally, I think, worked it out. Hence why they were announced. They were like, yeah, MIDI 2.0, we're gonna do it.
So it has more velocity. Does it have, like, I listened to a guy talk about it like a couple of weeks ago, and I've forgotten everything.
I honestly, I remember listening to 2 or 3 things and being like, okay, cool. So they're going to 16-bit velocity. They're going to be like make it fully backwards compatible with MIDI 1.0. They're going to make it so VST3, which is like for a virtual instrument. So VSTs are like synthesizers but virtual, right? It's what you use
Yeah.
in Ableton or Logic when you open a synthesizer. That's the thing.
Yeah.
VST3 is like quite a high resolution thing, and sometimes people don't use MIDI to control that. They use like an open source controller, so it's like got more resolution. They
Oh,
make that
really?
themselves.
Oh, so
Yeah.
those exist.
Yeah. So people like there's alternatives to MIDI that people have been using for a while, but they're not like standardized. And so the idea being that like MIDI 2.0 is going to be like extremely integrated with VST3. I don't know what that means. That
It just means it's going to work nicely. We would have to think about it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is like how MIDI packages its information digitally on your computer. So like you have .mid files, which are like the sort of like if I export the MIDI file out of Sibelius or whatever, you get the .mid file.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of numbers that a program interprets.
Yeah, of course. And it's like it's got tempo information, it's got dynamic information, it's got note information, it's got velocity information, it's got pitch bend information, it's got lots of information in there. But like sometimes it's pretty crap. Like you import one MIDI file from one software to another. It's like all the information just doesn't. Yeah, it's a mess. It doesn't integrate very well. And so I think they're gonna change they've changed that like how MIDI messages are like formulated in that file type.
Oh, no way.
And they're upping the amount of bytes per it's that higher resolution thing again, but in terms of like how many bytes does it take to store like one note is like no longer, it's not 1 byte, it's now 5, and so it means you've got all this extra information that you could possibly have about that note, which is interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting, right? Because it's like in the real world there's like infinite numbers of possibilities to determine a note. Obviously, like you can't control all of those.
No,
you can't even every time you play a note on your trumpet, right? Like it's different.
I don't think I've ever played 2 notes exactly the same ever. Impossible. I wish you could do that. I've right.
But you can get pretty close. Like we can get pretty close, like for our ears. But it's like I think the idea with MIDI 2.0 is it's meant to be like as close to, like closer to reality, because MIDI has always had that like connotation, at least to people who aren't like in the music tech understanding world. Like they're like, oh, it just sounds like Mario, man. Like
it's a MIDI really file. Geez,
yeah, it just sounds really 8-bit and like crap, and there's no.
People think of Sibelius sounds when I think of MIDI.
Yeah, there's no depth to it. And it's like, of course, well, like MIDI 1.0, you can do all that stuff, but it just takes a lot of programming. I think the MIDI 2.0 thing is going to be a little bit more like in terms of like if I want to play it into a MIDI keyboard, it's going to be a lot more like expressive.
Right. Okay. Well, that's actually really sick, actually. Does it...
If it works.
If it works. Pitch bending and stuff, will like let you do different things?
Yeah. Pitch bend, tremolo, vibrato.
Oh, that's cool.
All that sort of stuff. Will all be stored information.
That's actually really exciting. Like when I heard about that, I was like, wait, hang on. As if we're only on version 1, and it turns out we're just still on version 1.
Yeah.
So, I just can't believe it's taken 50 years. Yeah. 40 years.
40 years for them to come up with a new 2.0.
And people get upset when Apple takes a while to release the next iOS.
Oh, I know. Could you imagine as well if you were one of the dudes, like some of the dudes, so Dave Smith, for example, who like was the dude who wrote the thing being like, we need to come up with a standard and like, we need to make it so all things can talk to each other. Dave Smith's old, man. He's like, I'm just going to look it up. How old is Dave Smith? He was born in... Damn you, Wikipedia, you don't say.
Oh,
I don't know. He's old. He's old, though. He's bald. He's got a mustache that's grey.
He's grey hair. Oh, a grey mustache. He must be pretty old. But here's the thing about like a MIDI 2.0. I never even like consciously thought to myself, when is the next version of MIDI going to come out?
No, of course not. Could you just assume it's one of those things that's constantly updating?
I didn't even think it was. I was just like, oh yeah, cool, MIDI exists. It's just the new version of Logic.
Well, it's one of those things as well, because that means the good thing about it only having one version so far, like up until now is that you don't have like that problem of compatibility between like really old machines and really new machines. Where it's
No,
like,
nothing.
oh no, my synthesizer from 1984 can't talk to my computer from 2016. And it's like, well, no, they can, because the
So
standard's the same and it hasn't changed in 40 years. And it's
no,
exactly
so
the same. You can go
it's
backwards
still
and
got
forwards.
100% compatibility with MIDI one.
Yeah, it will. It'll just be that problem of resolution. So they're gonna like, it'll just be having like they'll have a way. I'm not sure what they're gonna do about it, but it'll be scaled. So
Some
like,
maths thing.
yeah, it'll just be an algorithm that works
They'll
out.
probably got
Like,
someone like Jeff who knows maths, but is also does, music engineering.
exactly,
What if they
exactly.
got Jeff
If they
and he
got
hasn't
Jeff to
told
do
us?
MIDI 2.0, I'd be really mad if he didn't tell us.
Yeah, I know, right? It's part of his like, user, his agreement. You cannot tell anybody
Yeah, exactly.
until it's released. He's like, sorry, guys, sup, guys. I'm good at maths because he was like a freak. So I got bored.
We got
So I
bored,
made
so I
MIDI.
decided to make MIDI 2.0. MIDI 1 wasn't good enough for me.
I needed that 129th velocity.
Yeah, of course. I needed my full depth of sensitivity going on my keyboard for that full expressivity to happen.
Yes, because jazz music.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we're coming up on an hour now. That was actually pretty fun. So thanks, Dexter.
No worries, man.
Definitely
Good
gonna have you
chat.
back. Yeah, very good chat. Definitely gonna have you back on another podcast because I think there's heaps of stuff to talk about.
Oh, of course. There's always, we can dive right in and do more niche stuff. We didn't even talk about any of my experience working on sound for film. We mostly talked about music. We didn't even really talk that much about sound, which, I mean, they're the same thing, but they're also very different things. So
Yeah, that could be the next episode. What is sound versus music?
it's a
Yeah,
good topic.
good topic. All right, so I think we'll end the episode there. Thank you, Dexter.
Thank you.